Hey, everyone out there in YouTube land, Dan here from GeekCast Radio, doing another installment of my must-read comics videos where I talk about some of my personal favorites or what I feel like are some of the recent best books that have come out. Today, I will be discussing Lighter Than My Shadow by Katie Green, a graphical memoir of her life, much of her early adolescence and the struggles that she faced dealing with anorexia and a number of other challenges that came up. And the reason I chose this book, ultimately because it's a very good and powerful story, but it also emphasizes why comics can be such an effective medium to tell a story like this. And Roger Ebert had this saying that movies are empathy machines. And I feel like that very much can be applied to all forms of art, including comics, where the power of comics, I think, is that it can place you into the open space of the mind of the reader, of the writer, get an understanding of where they are psychologically, as well as the visual representation of that. So this is a very good example of this. And the art, I think, does a good job of kind of putting you in the state of mind of Katie, her challenges that she faced, the life that she lived, and what it's like to kind of struggle with something of this nature. As someone who's never, and when you see a lot of these simple drawings here, you can see this all like black on a white page, and that's a motif that continues throughout the book. And I think it makes a lot of sense because I think we've all had those times in our life where we felt a certain way and we couldn't necessarily use words to properly describe it. There was just something off. And how sometimes when you have a book like this or the medium of comics, you can sometimes visually represent that in a way that makes a lot more sense. You know, someone who's never struggled with anorexia, I have no idea what that it's like. And not necessarily that I do just reading this, but it gives me far more of an understanding of it. And I think why this book ultimately works too is it's just showing that struggle and showing kind of the power to go through it and still find happiness and still find a way to overcome those challenges. It's not easy. You need support. People around you can be more of a hindrance even when they're trying to help. But I think it's a good just to showcase that, you know, there are times and places where as an individual, we're just not going to understand the plight someone is going through, and it's okay. And it's sometimes they may not understand it. And I think a book like this is a good example of that. As you know, you see a person who doesn't even, I think, fully grasp what they're dealing with. And, you know, it's a great family dynamic, and you can tell for sure that this is coming from an authentic place. Like, I love the art here. It's very, you know, straightforward and simple to the point of telling the story. And as I mentioned with that those black kind of squigglies that show up, and you see it here too, especially when there's just that feeling that you can't escape from, and that feeling that like haunts you even when you're trying to get away from it. And it's just, you know, I think there's a lot of misconceptions that I had when it came to something like anorexia. I remember, you know, going to school and we have some of those like after school special videos we'd have to watch, and it almost approached it from a sense of vanity that's where anorexia came from. It's this idea of people trying to look prettier or something of that nature, where, you know, that's not really the case at all. It's far more complicated than that. And I think if you're a person that enjoys just seeing, well, enjoy is a strange word to use, but is compelled to, you know, see a story of a person and see basically their heart and soul put on the page, I think that is certainly the case there. There's just an emotional honesty, a vulnerability that is here that I think anyone could appreciate. And through that, there's an honesty that you get to. And I think that had to be, you know, challenging to write, to draw for sure. And it's certainly definitely even emotional coming from, you know, as a third party, just witnessing it in this comic book form. But, you know, I think comics can sometimes get shoehorned into being specific things. And I think a book like this, Lighter Than My Shadow, and, you know, it says it right there in the title, you know, it's certainly like that struggle. And then there are things that happen throughout, you know, and I know that the worry is for some people, it's like, oh, is this just going to be nothing but sadness? And it's just going to be just this, you know, life is already challenging. Do I need to read challenges of someone else? And I kind of understand that from an extent. I understand where comics can be a form of escapism, but at the same time, I think comics can be much more than that. Like, I don't think any form of art should ever be shoehorned into being one specific thing. And even if you're looking for escapism, in a way, escaping into the life of someone else, even if that life is challenging, can be rewarding at a whole nother level. emotionally, and where maybe there's no entertainment value, quote unquote. I think there is at least an investment value, or like where you feel like you get to know someone and know something that you didn't know before, and you come out a stronger or more accepting person. And that's a lot to put on one book, obviously. That's kind of could be somewhat hyperbolic, but I think it's a small step into that direction. And I think, especially if you have a friend or know someone, someone who's raising a child, just having that knowledge of just being open-minded and the power of conversation, and some of the warning signs that may occur, or at least trying to not make it worse. So, we all, as someone who has a child who's of a young age, you always want to fix whatever the problem is. Your first instinct is to like, oh, that person's hurting, I need to fix it immediately. But sometimes doing that can cause more problems. So and sometimes, it's okay not to have the answers. And I think this covers, I think, just elements of that. And especially if you're that person struggling too. And so I think if you're ever a person who's ever, I think most of us have had times in which that life has had that albatross over it, where you just feel weighed down, and it's a different thing for different people. I think a book like this demonstrates that really well. So there's a high level of relatability, even if the specific struggle is not something that you've ever gone through. But yeah, I think this is ultimately a really remarkable story. Was Katie Green's first book, which I think is pretty impressive for your first reads. It is a hefty read, as you can see here, though it is rather quick. Like, I think you can, this isn't a book you're going to have to spend like 18 hours on. I think you can get through it relatively on time. But here's some more of that art. Again, that depiction of just that need and I say anorexia, and actually I'm incorrect in that terminology, but it was just basically struggling with eating, as it basically went one way or the other, the binging, the purging, and that's something. That's terminology like I've heard in my life. I hear about it, but I've never really seen it depicted in a way that wasn't designed to just teach you rather than allow you to learn. So yeah, again, one of the most recent comics. This came out a couple of years ago, and it was on my favorite comic book list of that year, and it continues to be up there. Actually, again, this is another book you can get at most libraries. So if you want to just test it out, give it an opportunity. I haven't seen anything recently if Katie Green's going to write anything more, but I hope so, because if this is your debut book, I think there's a lot more potential there to tell even better stories. This coming from at least a personal place gives it a lot of weight for sure. But yeah, so again, another high recommend, another book that I think is up there for anyone that, if you're looking for something new, something different in the world of comics, highly advise picking up Lighter Than My Shadow. Wonderful read that it will, I think, leave you moved by the end. So, all right. Well, that's the end for this video. If you want to listen to more from me, you can do so. I host a weekly podcast, Comic Concierge, that comes out every Monday and Thursday. Number of videos on this GeekCast radio site as well. I do weekly polls. I do some reviews of Marvel books as well, and going to be starting some new things. So let me know what you're thinking of it. I know we're brand new in the world of comic book videos for YouTube. There's a lot out there, so we're trying to cover as much ground as we can to see what's working, see what people are liking. But for now, remember that comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, thanks for watching.